We are now going to cover the view controller's lifecycle. By now, if you have followed along in the previous videos, we have a sample app, and I'm gonna go forward and launch the sample app. It doesn't do much, but it has a launch screen, which is pink in color, and the blue color main storyboard with a Hello World label. And the main storyboard is actually attached to my view controller class. And as you can see from the inspectors, I'm gonna bring it up by selecting view controller, and it's actually attached to my view controller class. So it's there. We have also covered already all the application lifecycle methods. So we know definition of object with options is going to get called, and then we are going to have our scene delegates, lifecycle methods getting called, like will become active and will enter foreground and so on. Now we're going to look at, well, fine, my scene or my application is now active and it has been launched. What happens when I move from one view controller to another, or what happens when the first ever view controller is going to be displayed? What all options or whatever lifecycle methods I have to configure my views? So starting first, as when Xcode creates your template class, it already has created view did load method. Now, looking carefully, you see that the view controller extends the UI view controller, which is provided by Apple in the UI kit library, which is already imported for you. And when you actually look closer, then you will see that it has a bunch of methods which are defined, and you don't need to worry about all of them. But it does have methods for view did load, view will appear, will disappear, did disappear, and then there are some other map functions which are available, like laying out some views and other items. And not we don't need to go deep into each one of them, but the idea here is that is an example of inheritance. So you're inheriting from UI view controller, you will have to use the override function to override the default implementation which have been provided in UI view controller, but you still want to keep the implementation which is present in the parent class. So you should always start all these lifecycle methods with super dot view did load, or super dot view will appear, or super dot view did disappear. So that out of the way, now let's start looking at the life cycle. The first one is view did load. The view did load will get called once and only once for a given view controller. The first time it's getting loaded. And you can conceptually start thinking about it and say that, okay, well, when you hit the play button on your app, well, it does get loaded once. So isn't it that it's actually getting loaded on each display? And it's not. It's actually getting loaded only once because we have so far not covered different navigation controllers which are present. For example, if you start looking at some details of some of the existing Apple apps, let's say you start looking at the apps like the settings app, then you see that, okay, I have the main settings screen, and then you have options like journal. If I click on the option like journal, then I have gone into the options which are journal, and then I can go into other detailed option like keyboard. But then when I hit the back button, I go back to journal, I hit the back button, go to settings. And now in these cases, the controller is not getting reloaded. These are navigation controllers which are present, which help you navigate back and forth. But your controllers which are actually rendering the view are not getting reloaded again and again. In this scenario, when I first loaded settings, the view did load get got called. But once after hitting from the settings screen, I hit general. I went to the general, and the general view controller view did load would have got called. But when I hit the back button, the view did load did not got called because the controller already exists. So it's actually when you go forward and create the controller for the first time that your view did load would get called. The app documentation would be very clear about these lifecycle methods, and they will also give you some disclaimers. If you notice that in Swift, all these items are lazily loaded. So typically, iOS calls view did load only once when the view is created, like we were saying. However, the content view is not necessarily created when the view controller is first instantiated. Instead, it is lazily created the first time system or any code accesses the controller's view property. So all it's trying to do is say that, okay, view controllers, view did load got called only once, but inside your main storyboard, you have the main view, right? This is the view that you are attaching to the root view, which is present inside your app or your window. And we are just going to go forward and open up our slide deck. We can look at how our views are actually assembled. So by default, everything that we are actually doing, when you launch an app, basically a window is allocated for your app by the iOS ecosystem itself, and that's the window. On top of the window, you can have some sort of navigation controllers. You can have a tab bar controller, or you can have a navigation controller on top of it, or you can have none. There's not a necessity to have any navigation controllers. And you can have a single page app like the one which is actually shown at the top, but this is your custom view hierarchy. So to the window, you attach your root view, and then to that view, you are going to attach a bunch of subviews that you're defining. These are the widgets that you're defining, and eventually everything gets assembled into the assembled views. What Apple is going and saying here is that the view itself, which is present inside your storyboard here, is not immediately attached or is made available the moment you actually instantiate the view controller, and it's actually available when the first time it's actually referred, so it's lazily loaded. Just a quick side note that we need to take care of, but main idea, view did load basically would get called the first time, first and only time your controller is initiated. So you, if you want to do any initialization stuff, this is a good place to do. Sometimes if you're required to make any service call, retrieve the data and show that, that may be the place to do. You will of course show a loading indicator till the time the service call completes, but that probably is the right place to do those one-time configuration items. Now, once your view controller has been loaded, a bunch of lifecycle methods are going to get called. First is that your view controller is now going to go forward and appear at some point in time. Now, just before your view controller appears, a view will appear, lifecycle method will call. Now, at this point in time, the view has not really appeared, but it's about to appear. And the definition here is not exactly that, okay, something is going to show up on the screen, because what's going to come up may be obstructed by some other overlay window, which may be transparent, or it could be like this phone call notification pop up, something is there in front of it. But all view will appear with means is that now your view is going, your view, and going back to your storyboard, your view is going to get attached to the window. So it's going to appear. It has not appeared yet. But once the view appears, you can go forward and call view did appear. And you get this lifecycle method, and you can make some adjustments if you want to do there as well. Now, this is just before the view was going to get appeared, so not advisable to do a lot of heavy lifting, but you can do some minor layout adjustments or basically reconfiguring of your views if required. For example, if you navigated, even if you were using a navigation controller and you navigated away from your controller, like I hit on general, I went to settings, and more detailed settings. When I come back, at that time, view did load is not going to get called, but maybe you want to actually rearrange some of those items, and some action maybe getting done on these later screens that were actually presented. And when you come back, you want to maybe just refresh. Maybe it was an alerts controller when you get navigated in, you probably saw those alerts, and you come back, you want to update the batch to say that, well, you don't have any new alerts. And those items can actually occur in view will appear. And view did appear again after the view has appeared, and you want to do something like based upon some configuration, maybe there's an alert in the action sheet or something that you want to display, you can do that in view did appear. Now, when I am actually on the screen, and from settings screen, I hit on general, then at that point in time, for my settings screen, the view will disappear, will first get called. Again, the notion here is not really that the view is going to go away, but it's the fact that the content view or the main view is now detached. Um, after while view will disappear, then immediately in a few milliseconds, view did disappear will get called. And the view did disappear means that okay, the view has gone out and you want to do some cleanup exercises. You can have free to do so in your view did disappear lifecycle method. Let's go forward and have a quick look at them. So I'm going to go back to my view controller. I know that, okay, the first one we were talking, view did load, we have already covered. We will say view will appear. So, okay, we have view will appear. And of course, I can see that I can override some functions here. Now I can go forward and say view did appear. And then I'm going to call view will disappear. And there are other functional like layouts of views which are very important, but you don't need to worry about them right now. We can talk about them later. And then view did disappear. So I have implementation of all of them, and we're going to see that these are actually getting called. But here I did not call the super. So let's see what happens. I hit the play button. I get my app launched, the pink screen, it goes in, the view will appear. Okay, so it did get called. I probably should have put a big point. It's too late now, but so let's just relaunch it. You will see that view will load will get called first. Okay, so after the launch screen, view did load get called. I hit the play button. View will appear and got called. Okay, now next one should have been view did appear. Okay, which gets called. Okay, and it's getting laid out. Okay, all nice. Okay, and in this one, everything worked out fine because we're not doing any real subviews, and we're not attaching subviews, we're not doing moving any of those items, we're not doing any constraint management. But if you were doing all the stuff, you will see that your views will not behave properly because you should always be calling the parent property for view will appear. You should be calling the parent method view will appear as the superclass as well, so that it can do its default behavior. Similarly, view did appear, you should always go forward and call the parent function. We will disappear. Let's do the same thing. And the view did disappear. And this basically is a side note pointing out that, okay, most developers sometimes make this mistake that once they define the method, they forget to call the super, and then they have to debug through and then realize why certain actions are not getting called, like why their layouts of views is not getting called or something like this. You should call the super so that the default implementation is also getting executed. Now, for this simple application, you will not see any change in behavior. As I will demonstrate, I'm going to just disable the debug point so I don't have to go over all of them again. But yeah, for the simple application, there are no real changes happening there. For now, that's all that should suffice for you to know from vController lifecycle methods.